Fail. So I've been messing around with Warden still, trying to get it to produce the results I expected. And so when I built this, the idea was pretty simple. It was like, what if we could just have a harness that acted like a code reviewer, kind of like Seer and everything else, but was like super, super flexible. PLC worked great. And then we mostly have been iterating on quality of life, right? And a lot of that was like how the CLI works, how the GitHub flows work, etc. Anyways, today I finally got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna run the test on Sentry's code base. And the test in this case was I wanted to be able to identify and prevent effectively all or as close to all as we can get versions of certain security vulnerabilities. One such example of that is something called an indirect object reference. Where's my editor? Let's see. Actually, I don't know which one's which. We'll talk about this in a second. But for example, say you have a projects endpoint. It lists a series of projects from Sentry, and you just return all projects. That would obviously be a problem. You need to return all projects that are coupled to the organization you're querying. If you don't do that, it's effectively leaking data. And so we've had a lot of vulnerabilities like that. Some of them can be pretty serious, but that's just one class of vulnerability, but it's a common one. And so with LLMs, they're not deterministic, but you can make them pretty effective at solving certain problems for a non-trivial amount of money. And so what I did is I set out to develop a skill, which is just prompt, that would detect these problems in PRs and identify any that might exist in Sentry's code base. And so a few things I want to talk about. First is, how do you develop that skill using synthesis? How did this work? And then what was the result? Because somehow I am unbelievably, maybe irrationally excited about this Warden project, and nobody else seems to get it. So either I'm fucking crazy or there is something here, and hopefully after this you'll understand and be like, holy shit, this is cool. We can do a lot with this. Okay. So security vulnerabilities. How do you write a skill that's going to detect vulnerabilities? We started this with Greg wrote a skill in the repo that was trying to be a generic version of this. Let's see, it's in the skills here. That's not going to go well. Django access review. So this was Greg's first attempt at a roughly generic skill that looks for specifically indirect object reference kinds of bugs, like very narrowly scoped. It did okay. It found some stuff. There was a few problems with this. One, it wasn't like super comprehensive. Two, it gets lost in our code base sometimes. And three, false positive. False positive is like the worst part of developing a prompt. And so you might ask, like, well, how do you fix that? Because, like, good luck doing this. Like, I don't think Greg wrote this for what it's worth. I assume he generated this from some context, which I'll talk about. I'm going to assume he did a version of what I'm going to explain to you how to do. But it wasn't the be all end all. And so what I did this morning, because for some reason I've been awake since 2 a.m., is what I call skill synthesis, which I assume is a reasonable name for it. I need that repo back. But the idea here is pretty simple. And so let's bring this over here. I've got, no, it's better here. I've got a goal. You know, I want to prevent security problems in Sentry. I've got a bunch of source material that helps me understand how I might do that. And so a first pass I took at this in this repository was I had it scrape a bunch of OWASP stuff, which is like the top 10 vulnerabilities kind of thing. And I had to create this security review skill. And the idea was like, okay, it has examples, it has knowledge of all of these things that will help it have the right context. I mean, once in a while, I would find something like, I think Greg had some success. Like it actually did prevent some real bugs from slipping through, but it was like, it was iffy at best case. There is some useful stuff in here. But it's pretty complicated. It's like a lot of material. Like you can see all these files. This is a pretty complex skill. Anyways, results were not great. That was a form of synthesis though. Like I said, hey, Claude, here's this website with all this information. It's in here if you're curious. I think it's in the license or something. Yeah, cheatseries.owasp.org. I want you to develop a skill out of that. So that was step one. I found the source information. Step two was I need a way for it to know how to generate the skill effectively, like a good skill, which is kind of like the prompt engineering bullshit. Um, and we have one of those, and that's where we're going to start. So we have the skill creator. This was also created using synthesis. And so this is a little bit of like recursion, but I fed it the Anthropic skill creator, the Codex skill creator, and then I had it go search for like, I don't know, hot tips on how to do this the best, right? Which is mostly from Anthropic and OpenAI. And I had to generate this. So this is fully generated. I didn't review it. I don't care. I shouldn't care. If it can't generate it, it's not maintainable. That's like the model I'm following right now. And so it did. It generated this. It's pretty good. It's heavily inspired by the source material at the end of the day. And so a lot of these are probably pretty dang similar to the source material. It's got a script that it created to validate it and stuff. So it does a pretty good job at generating skills. And part of that is how you lay out the information that's somewhat optimized for an LLM. It's like order of information, is how to use reference files, all these things, right? Things that you kind of need to know exist, but like you're not going to be an expert on because this is not your job 24/7. And honestly, even if it was, I think it's all like voodoo and placebo anyway, so it doesn't matter. So first thing we did was synthesize the skill creator. And now we can use this to synthesize other skills, right? Because we're basically summarizing information over and over. And so we summarize how to create a skill and we persisted at this as an artifact in skills, as a skill creator skill. And then we're going to use that summary now to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, right? And so that's how we got security review, for example. But it didn't work that well. So how would you make this better? Well, what if you could take source data and actually give it much more relevant, summarized context on how to do it? And so that's what I did this morning. And so I took, where's my clipboard of everything? I asked Cloud Code to look at the last year of the Sentry repo and find everything that looked like a security patch. And this is what I found. 9, 19, 22, 31. It came up with 34 patches. There might be more. I don't know. But it doesn't, more or less, it may not matter here. And then I had it use this as a source material, and I had it synthesize security skill. I don't have the prompt offhand. Maybe I'll grab it later when I do the write-up, but it wasn't that complicated. Like I'm spelling out what I want to do. I want to define these kinds of things. I wanted to develop a skill. And so I had it find all the source material, and I told it to use skill creator to turn that into a usable skill in this repository. And what's really interesting here, and I think is somewhat clever and useful, is we don't control the models, so we can't do reinforcement learning or anything like that. But there's a little bit of like the sneakiness in here where we're like summarizing some information that is actually like kind of like reinforcement learning. It's like we're giving it Sentry specific context. And so, for example, endpoint patterns, convert args. That is a Sentry thing. The endpoint pattern, all Sentry. This is all custom code of ours. And so what we've done is created a much more hyper curated skill. And what's interesting here, and you may already be thinking of this, is like, what if you did this with Sentry production data for Sentry? What if we could take a bunch of errors from Sentry, summarize them, and use that to create a bug detection skill? I don't know. I'm going to find out, though. I'm going to find out very soon. And I think it'll be very fucking good, and I think it'll blow everything out of the water. But we'll see. Anyway, so we have this. I synthesized this. I didn't review it whatsoever. I'm like, cool, I see privilege escalation. I see a couple words in here. I know it roughly did the right thing. And I did it because I did a plan mode first. So I ran plan mode. And I actually have one of these up over here somewhere. Nope, this terminal. Sorry, I've got a lot of things going on. I actually have it over here. This is an example of me iterating on that core skill synthesis, right? So I have this Sentry security skill. It found a thing, which I'll talk about in a second with Warden. And I'm like, I am a lazy human, so the LLM's going to do the work for me. Hey, can you check if this is valid? It's not so much that I'm lazy. It's going to be way more efficient at digging through some of this. Also because I don't have like my tests, like the CI can't run locally right now and all this stuff, right? And so I'm like, here's the thing that I got from Warden from running the skill. Can you verify it? And it's like, well, yeah, it's real, but it's kind of like not quite accurate for what it said. I'm like, great. Now go evaluate the skill, run skill creator again, and come back with some suggestions on how we would improve it. And I do that in plan mode so I can kind of see what's going on. And I specifically do that because I actually want to review the diff, because at this point I want to be like, well, do I think that makes sense to include or remove, or and particularly like on the include side, because I don't want this to become too big. But the important thing here is I'm using the two existing artifacts. I'm using the skill creator summary, and I'm using the existing skill that we had, the security skill, and then I'm just augmenting it. So it's able to take in all this plus the example, and it's able to come up with like a pretty good pattern. And I did this a few times this morning because I ran it first, and I'll show you in a second. I ran Warden first, and it got a bunch of false positives. And I ran one pass, just one pass. I fed in the entire set of results, which I don't actually remember what they were. It wasn't like a code base run or anything. I just maybe had a few, but I fed them in, and I'm like, how would we improve this? Because I have a bunch of false positives. Same exact thing I'm doing right here, right? And then I ran it across every single API endpoint after that one change. And after that, I came back with, let's see, 17 findings. Findings being potential vulnerabilities in this case, right? And just ignore the rest of this document for now. I came back with 17 findings. Are they real or not? I don't know. Could be hallucinations. I did this through effectively. Let's see. We got this. I did this through this. So I pointed Warden with verbose mode to this directory, which means it's going to run on every Python file in that directory with anything that's configured. And the only thing that's configured is the security skill. And so this is what it does. It's cost a bunch of money. We'll talk about how it actually is pretty cheap for what it does. But it's going to run that. It's going to run that skill in a sort of clever way across all these. It wraps it in a harness. It does a bunch of other stuff to try to make it slightly smarter. And so I did that. And I said, I only made that one change here, right? Well, I also made another change. I did that exact same process, and I took the results from Warden. I fed them into Warden itself, and I'm like, hey, here's a hallucination. You don't control the skill. Is there something wrong in our harness that would help here? And there was. There was something that improved with the sort of how it suggests doing tracing of the problem. Basically, it's like think harder, and it's like the TLDR, I would say. And then I applied that, and then almost all the false positives went away. And that's where we got to the 17. And so maybe it's not almost at all, it's like half, but that's still like a massive win from what these things are by default. That's not what I want. I want the cursor window back. So I had 17, and then I ran another Cloud Code session. And I said, hey, I have this markdown file of all these findings, actually, look, hang on, I'll show you. This was the original result. So we had Warden run. It actually had a bunch of errors, and unfortunately, all these 529s, I increased the retries from 2 to 5. So hopefully that's less common in the future, but obviously like a bunch of these files it didn't even run on or wasn't able to report everything on. But then you have everything else. This took a very, very long time. You can see like one file is taking anywhere from 20 seconds to, almost 5 minutes. And it runs, I think 4 or 5 in parallel. And so it's, it's not as slow as it might look like, but it still took 10,000 seconds, which, how fucking long is that? I don't know. We're going to need a calculator because I don't care. No, you don't need a pass key for that. What is going on in Windows? 10,000 divided by 60. Divided by, is that minutes? Yeah, seconds, minutes, hours. So it took almost 3 hours to run. I actually think that might be right because I was doing other stuff this morning. Spoiler, it was 9 hours for me to get end-to-end with a bunch of security patches. This is what you're going to know about this. So this was not like a magic thing. It just happened. It still was a lot of work, but it's kind of like an interesting work. It's not me like going and digging through all the code, and it's way more efficient than doing it yourself. So anyways, this ran for 9 hours, came back with 17 findings. This is what they look like. Privilege escalation. That seems interesting. Missing off check. Okay, potentially bad. Let's find one in here that's quite fun. SQL injection. This is real. Let's see. There's another one in here. Ooh, I don't know. Maybe the setup wizard one was false. There were a few that were actually like pretty critical in here. And there might be more still because I haven't run it all yet. But it found those 17 names, right? And one other thing I want to show you about that is that took $110 to run, and that was just most of the API endpoints. Now that's not a lot of our code, but that's not the whole code base. That was it's like 350 files or something, I think. There's like 4,000 files. There's a bunch of JavaScript. This is only doing the back. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff. It could be very expensive, but $100. What came out of that was it came back with these are the original findings. And it came back with like false, true. And so let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so I guess it's 8 that it came back as true. Or 7. maybe 7, whatever. It doesn't matter. Rounding error. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8. So there were 8 genuine issues. And I'm like, okay, we got to patch these things. And I'm certainly not going to do it by hand. And so then I just ran this Claude and I skip permissions because I roughly can trust it for this kind of thing. And there's a chance it'll do something funky, but it's mostly okay. Generally, you should sandbox this. So, whatever. Take a look at the findings. I moved them out of the directory because the first thing it fucking did was commit the file. There's a handful in here that seem to be true. So I wanted to verify again, basically. I'm trying to give it as much of my intent as possible. For each of them, go through, run a task, track the work. And so like this actually was, I think, the artifact afterwards. Oh yeah. And this was the artifact when it was done. You'll see like fix applied down here. And so this was when it was tracking its work. Identify the issue, find the test. This was super fucking important. You got to tell it exactly what you needed to do. And honestly, I probably could have been better here because there were a few that we had to go back and do a minor iteration on. I'll talk about. Extend the test coverage because things should have test coverage and we don't want to create new tests because it gets really annoying when you let it do that kind of thing. Create the fix, use our /commit skill to a feature base, then use the /create PR skill. So it did all this without me doing anything. And then update the result in that file. And then stop, basically. And then it's like, hey, you can't run tests locally because my environment's fucked up. So blah, 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 And you can add to this to like be more thorough and whatnot. And the most importantly, it's like you're saving or adding a few dollars. And I did this all while I was working on other stuff, right? Which is normally how you do agentic stuff. And so I had this run, it generated all these patches. And I think about half or maybe 2/3 good on the first try. Like absolutely perfect. I did nothing. I like quickly skimmed it and I'm like, this seems sane. Josh looked at it. I enabled auto merge and then I went to the next one, rinse and repeat. And there were a few where it like had a few things that were wrong. But generally it's pretty good. And so, out of that came 8 vulnerabilities that we fixed. This one's an indirect object reference. By the way, this is an example of one. Let me move this over here. Sorry. It's missing the organization ID lookup, which means, and I would have to go look exactly what's going on here. There's a high probability that you could just bypass the organization and just enumerate the member IDs. And this is the fucking problem. This is the kind of bug we're trying to prevent, right? Anyways, so we fixed that. And it has a test. So it's 100% fixed. And actually, I think this one we validated. I added the test first just to prove it because it's kind of hard to trace this in code. And that's my version of TDD. And I'd highly recommend it on backend code. Just like add the test to verify the regression and then go fix it. Make sure the test fails at first and it should fail and it's correct and then go fix it. So we did that. It fixed 8 of them with very minimal overhead, right? 9 hours, fix a bunch of vulnerabilities. I don't have the numbers offhand, but you can ask the security team. I bet because some of these were serious or more serious at the very least. $50K on the high end, we would pay. So $100 day of my time or anybody's time. Cause like any of you could do this. It wasn't that hard, right? You just have to know the techniques. Very fucking valuable. Okay. So that's one. The next thing we did, and so this is in the skills repo, by the way. You can read this if you want. It's pretty straightforward. Like this is common sense to me, but second thing we did is now this will run on every pull request. I'm going to run it against the whole repo very shortly, which, I'll see you tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully it doesn't error out over and over. I'm going to run it against the whole repo. I might like try to break it up or something. And I'm actually going to have Claude do the whole thing. It's going to manage the process. I'm going to tell it to run Warden. I'm going to tell it to chunk it up, like segment the code base somehow. I don't actually give a shit how. And then when it comes with findings, I'm going to have it fire off a subagent. Actually, I got to figure this out. I might have to set up a second copy of the repo. But basically what I want to have it do is coordinate the whole thing, fire off a subagent when it needs to create a new patch, but only run one at a time or something like this. So it can keep a backlog and manage a queue and blah, blah, blah. And then just do the whole pull request thing for me. Now, it might do it might be like noisy. That's fine. We're not going to do this kind of flow all the time. But, if we got 8 out of 17, that's pretty good. And it's worth looking at. And I would bet you that every single false positive has something that could be changed. Either the comments could be improved or it's actually maybe not a true false positive. Maybe there's actually some truth to it, but it's not a real risk. Or we need to fix the skill or something. So I think there's going to be a lot more fine. But generally I was like super, super impressed by, what happened. And I thought this would happen. And so my next goal is I'm going to go compete more with Seer. and I'm going to go synthesize data from two sources. I'm going to synthesize data and I'm going to pick a repo. Maybe I'll do Sentry. I'll take maybe a lot of commits. I'll run a coordinator and I'll be like, I want you to look at coding practices in this repo, summarize a bunch of shit. Maybe it's a repo map. I don't know. And then try that as a skill and see if it detects bugs. I have to come up with some like basic test case for this. And then I'm going to feed it in a bunch of Sentry data. And that's where I think it gets interesting, because if we can prove that there's value in our data without having a frontier model or being a frontier model company, without training our own models, that's fucking huge. And I think there is. Based on this, you'd be hard pressed to not believe there is. And again, this is not rocket science. You don't have to be an academic to understand this. It's like, if you feed it the right information, it will work. And I always think of this from an engineering principles. It's like map reduce. You're summarizing over and over. And if you can summarize the right information and give it in the right context, then it can do like these things, right? And so that's kind of the gist of it. I'm going to be back with a bunch more PRs for vulnerabilities, I'm sure. But so far, so good. And so this is going to be running on pull requests, like I mentioned. We get the Warden channel in Sentry. So flag anything that's funny in there. We do have data in Sentry. This is using the whole product. It's kind of a pain in the ass to use. We all know this sometimes. So we might not see a problem, but we are tracking like total spend, hypothetically. It's in metrics. We're tracking like runs, findings, all this stuff. And so we hypothetically can see the data. But if you're seeing things that are like, oh, this isn't good, or this could be better, one, I'm going to need help. We will need help. It's not like we're trying to solve this for everybody. It's a framework. That's it. I just built a harness that's useful. And I'm focused on the user experience of the harness, less so than can I micro optimize random skills for people. But two, also, if you see things that don't look like the way you would expect it to behave as a human, flag it. I'm aiming for perfection here. And I think it's pretty fucking good right now. I'm pretty confident this is best in class experience. I think it's better than anybody on the market from a code review thing. Like, Cursor's pretty good, but we do better things. And like, there's little examples here. Actually, let me show you like a real world one. But I need a Warden flag. That's Sear. I've got to have a Warden flag somewhere. Let me see if I can find one real quick. There's a lot of stuff that we just give for transparency. And the goal is maximum usability and to have the workflow that looks like it would be like a normal user, you know? Actually, we're not going to have one on here. I'm not going to try to look it up right now, unless there's one in here. Because I think it resolves its own commits, right? Cursor. We have like the bug finder thing, but it's not crazy useful. How is this still flagging stuff? Hang on, let me go run a command while we're here. Which terminal is which? We want this one? So we want this one. This is skill evaluation. This is in Sentry, so we need a Warden one. We need this, and this is what we do. And honestly, I need to automate this somehow. Like, this is a waste of my energy to like just go be like try to address the bot comments. Like, this should be a thing that already exists. And like, we could turn on the cursor bug bot auto fix thing, but I don't know if that's like the best solution to the problem. Anyways, and so interestingly, this is still going. Oh, because it's running the whole API again. Are there any findings yet? There are 2 findings. What do we got? Finishing up. What do we got? Read-only users can modify. Am I not updated? Hang on. This one is fixed in main. This might be a new bug that I didn't find last time, actually. So we're going to validate that, actually. I do not have enough terminals. All right. So here, just in case you're curious, you know, you mostly gotten the gist now. Verify if this finding from Warden is true. That's it. It's pretty simple. We'll find out shortly. You'll see a pull request in AI and security channels very shortly if there's another one. But cool. I'm gonna call it there. Hopefully this was helpful. If there's questions, if you're curious about any of these things, just ask. Happy to tell you what I've learned and what I know. But cool. All right. Peace.